Hello, Rory. Welcome to The Rest is Politics with me, Alastair Campbell.
And me, Rory Stewart. And
And
how are you, Alastair?
I'm fine. I'm fine. I survived the debate. I'm in a very dark place. All the lights are on, but it's so dark.
Where are you?
I'm at
You
home, but for some reason, I've got lights on everywhere, but they're not working. Now, what did you make of that?
well, I think it's so I put out a tweet saying Rishi Sunak can win this debate on debating points, like it's a debating competition, but he's going to come across to people as though he's rude and patronizing. And I think that's about right. I think if this was a kind of technical high school debating competition, he won lots and lots of points, but the effect on people, I mean, my I don't know what works, but and I'd be interested to see what the comments are, but my Twitter thread is full of people saying, yeah, that's probably right, but in fact he comes across as rude, shouty, patronizing. Other people saying Starmer did look quite weak and cowed at bits. Some people blaming Michel Hussein. But it's an interesting problem. I mean, it's set up as though it's a formal debating competition. But what I suppose I wanted to start with maybe is just throw back to you and say, actually, does it really matter at this stage anyway? Is anything really going to change the result?
I mean, it's hard to know. I don't think there was a sort of moment where you thought, oh yeah, that's really going to change things. I actually got in home just in time for the start because I've been out speaking at an event, a lot of business people, a lot of environmental people, and what have you. And I did our usual sort of who's going to be the Prime Minister next week, and it was 100% Keir Starmer. And I don't think that tonight changed. I thought Sunak was much more aggressive than he has been. Do you know what one of my thoughts I kept having was that if Keir Starmer becomes Prime Minister, I wonder if Rishi Sunak might be a better leader of opposition than he is Prime Minister. But I think a lot of people watching that would have found he's so sort of tetchy and he's got these lines. Now, there were certain lines that he was definitely, we said in the first debate, he's definitely trying to land the thing about the £2,000 of tax. I noticed he moved off that. He now talks about thousands of pounds of tax. But I think the things he was trying to land today was retirement tax. I think that was a thing he kept trying to say. There is a clear choice. If he said that once, he said it 100 times. And also this idea that Keir Starmer doesn't really know what he stands for. But I think that I think there were times when Keir did look a bit sort of, lacking in energy and just wanted to shut Sunak up, but didn't want to play the same game of being rude. Where I thought Keir was strong, though, was on the much more empathetic stuff. I thought he was good on women. I thought it was interesting how there were clearly, I think there must have been some trans community people or certainly supporters of the trans community. He got a lot of support for being very kind of passionate and emotional about that. But I don't think it changed the fundamentals.
So there was something interesting. When they came into the out of their cars, the BBC was showing Rishi Sunak looking very kind of sort of nervous, slightly hunched, spoke very briefly to the Director General of BBC. Keir Starmer came in with a huge big smile. There were lots of jokes, had some time to chat, walks in. But then I was so struck somehow that when he got on stage, that wasn't coming across. And you will have seen these articles recently in papers saying, I've just spent, a couple of weeks traveling around with Keir Starmer. I really warmed to him in private. He's terrific, but somehow this doesn't come across in public.
Yeah.
There is something a bit interesting there. I really felt, gosh, looking at him sort of unguarded outside, he's this very kind of natural, relaxed, smiley person. And then when he's on stage, he becomes extremely kind of sort of stiff. Is he just nervous?
No, look. I don't think he loves the format. I think he was conscious, particularly after the first debate, that Sunak was really going to try and rough him up, and he was determined not to make it a shouting match. And I actually thought it was quite effective. In fact, the first really big clap line was when he said, maybe if you just, Keir started to try and answer a question. Rishi Sunak started to interrupt him. And Keir was directing directly at the woman who'd asked the question. I think it was about benefits. And he said, maybe if you listened a bit more to people instead of this constant interruption, you wouldn't be so out of touch, thereby showing up the rudeness, but also linking it to what we know is a big problem for Rishi Sunak, which is the out of touch thing. I think the other thing though that Rishi Sunak,
And that got applause, didn't it? That got a
it
round
did,
of applause.
and
Yeah,
I actually think what was a bit sad and weak about Rishi Sunak's performance, there were several points where it was obvious to me, having written lots of clap lines in my time, that he had clap lines that he was delivering designed to get a round of applause, which just didn't work. Now, the one he kept trying, and this I think is the one they're trying to land as a way to shaping up for the last week of their campaign, was this point he kept making about do not surrender to Labour, do not surrender on illegal migration, on tax, on pensions and so forth. I think that was them signalling that is going to be a big theme of the final week of the campaign. Whereas I think for Labour, it was very much, we're clear what we were saying, we're clear what we're going to do, and we're just going to carry on doing the same thing.
I think your line on him being almost a leader of the opposition as a way of describing Rishi Sunak's performance, a good one.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially his thing was to treat Keir Starmer as the incumbent Prime Minister and keep saying, you say you're going to be Prime Minister in a week's time, what are you going to do? And I think the real line, doesn't matter about the individual, but the line that basically keeps coming back is, well, I've told you what I'm going to do, what are you going to do? Well, I told you what I'm going to do, what are you going to do? I've introduced this, but how are you going to stop them? And it's so I suppose the undercurrent is to try to suggest that Keir Starmer hasn't quite got a detailed plan on this stuff. And
Sorry, just to tell you, somebody's posted breaking news, YouGov poll on who won, Starmer 50, Sunak 50. So I think that I thought, I always try to think of these things about what happens when they go back to their various camps afterwards. I think Keir Starmer will go back thinking he handled the aggression much better than the first time round. He also, I think, came over better and warmer. Definitely one on the sorry, that was my phone, one on the applause front. And I think Rishi Sunak will go back and his team will say, look, we had certain points we wanted you to land and you did. But I agree with your first point. I think to somebody who's a floating voter, I think that would just come over as, oh God, he's just shouting at him. He's not actually. It's
also a question of whether our culture's changed, because I think probably, I don't know, maybe 40, 50 years ago, you would really get a lot of marks for landing the debating points, being snappy, being succinct. But if you look down the thread here, we've got quite a lot of people saying Starmer looked really uncomfortable, painful to watch, etc. But we've also got a lot of people saying public school, privileged, patronising. So there's an association both on the comment thread and on Twitter with an idea that particular skill that Rishi Sunak's got of being able to say, yeah, I've told you what I'm going to do. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Actually comes across as kind of private school rather than something you want in a Prime Minister.
Somebody just asked the question, has the relationship between Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition always been this sort of hostile and negative? No is the short answer, I think. Look, there's obviously, I mean, let's be honest, Keir Starmer's trying to take Rishi Sunak's job, and it's one of the most high-profile jobs in the world, and it's humiliating when you have it taken away from you. But I think it's interesting that, I think when Tony Blair bumps into John Major these days, I think they have perfectly nice civil chats, and I think sometimes did when they were both in office, as it were. Let's just give people a list of it for those maybe who didn't. By the way, Rory, we're currently running at well over double of what the Sun got for the.
That's why Harry Cole hates us. This is great.
I know, yeah. I think I took this accurately.
Wait. Sorry, can I just explain people the reference Alice has made?
Sorry.
So the previous leaders' debate was streamed live on YouTube, and they got only 7,000 people watching it. What Alice is pointing out is that twice as many people are watching a commentary on a debate than actually watch the same debate, which the last debate, which is a slightly worrying world of kind of virtual podcasts taking over the real thing.
Yeah. Just to go through the questions, I think I took a note of them all. First question was about betting. We've talked about that. I think that went on a bit too long, to be honest. Welfare to work, disability, waiting list came up.
Welfare to work, can I just interrupt you on that
Yeah,
one? That was an interesting one. So welfare to work, again, I don't know whether people, I was watching it with my mother-in-law who's over from the States, and she was like, I don't get what this question's about. This is about the fact that since COVID, there have been 800,000 people who are no longer looking for work. And it's a really big conundrum because some of it is possibly long COVID, some of it may be health related, some of it is people who have just chosen not to go back to work. And so there are two responses to this, and neither of them seem convincing. There's the Rishi Sunak response, which seems to be just, we need to be tougher, and we need to say if there's a job out there for you and you don't get it, we're going to force you into it. And the Keir Starmer answer, which he gave 3 times, which is we have to cut NHS waiting lists. But it's a big issue, and one of the problems is none of the economists you talk to fully understand how it happened, why it happened. Very few other European countries have seen it, so we're really struggling to come up with an answer on it. Anyway, over to you again.
Yeah. So that came that went on for a fair bit. The issue of borders and immigration. Very good question from a young man. Where's the money coming from? Quite an aggressive question that got the loudest applause of all the questions, which is, are you two the best that this country can produce as the sort of choice?
What sort of question was that, though? I mean, it wasn't really a question, was it? How are they supposed to answer that?
Well, I think, you see, again, Rishi Sunak answered it by saying, well, this is what I've done. Keir Starmer likewise said, well, I did this and I did this and I've changed the Labour Party. I think I would have answered that a little bit. If I think with Keir, he could have said, well, you may not think I'm as charismatic as Boris Johnson, but I tell you, I'll be a much better Prime Minister. You may not think I'm as interesting as Liz Truss, but I tell you, I'll be a much better Prime Minister than her. And you may not think I'm kind of, as, I don't know how he would describe Rishi Sunak. So that's how I would have done it. So they had that one. Then they had bankrupt councils. Then they had women, and that's where single-sex bases came up. And I thought Keir, he was very, very strong on trans in a way
that's where maybe he found his stride a bit. So
yeah.
My sense is the debate had broke into thirds. First third, a little bit stiff. Second third, I think Rishi Sunak was really landing blows. I mean, if this was like a boxing match, Starmer was really struggling. Last third, as things slowed down, as Sunak was interrupting less, Starmer was able to get stuff out. For people who didn't watch the debate, that was particularly interesting. He said on transgender, look, I think that women-only spaces should be there. He talked about his own personal experience, and then he said, but I also think that all human beings should be treated with dignity and respect.
Yeah.
And when he was challenged on the Equalities Act, of course, he turned around to Michelle Hussein and said, no, it's in the Act. And of course, at that point, nobody challenges him. That's the point where he pulls rank as a senior lawyer. And nobody's going to.
And he also talked about the notes to the Act as well. I mean, only lawyers will talk about the notes of the Act. No, and I think I also liked when he, because Rishi Sunak kept coming back about, biological sex and, why won't you support me on this and what have you. And Keir Starmer had this big thing about, I see the job of leadership of bringing the country together rather than dividing it. And I think that does speak to people quite a lot. I was obviously, I'm sure you were, very pleased that Brexit was finally raised in one of these. I didn't think either of their answers were very good on that.
Question on that was absolutely lovely. So
the vinyl records.
The lady said, will you mend our broken trading relationship with Europe? And it was such a great question, but obviously none of them was proposing to do so.
Now, Rory, lots of our Scottish listeners and Welsh listeners and viewers are pointing out that none of the Scotland and Wales did not get a mention. I think that is a bit of an omission. Naomi keeps posting a message, and I felt this as well, nothing on mental health. Yet again, it is really alarming the way that mental health has just fallen off the agenda.
Somebody's just posted, very disappointed, climate change wasn't there.
Yeah. Also, there was I think the protest outside was Palestine, and yet Palestine didn't come up. I thought Michelle Hussein did well. I think it's very, very difficult, particularly when you've got people who know that they're limited in time. They want to speak. They're trying to speak. I thought she kind of kept it moving along pretty well.
Charlie O'Neill said that too. I mean, it's true that when Starmer was struggling, there were quite a lot of Labour supporters saying that she wasn't doing a good job. But I think
Right.
she probably feels a little bit like I do, that given that he's almost certainly going to be the next prime minister, it's good to ask these questions.
Yeah, I thought she handled it fine, and it's not easy. It really isn't easy. I thought the audience was interesting. They were clapping at points sometimes that I didn't expect them to, and then at other times, I'll tell you what. I think there were a lot of don't knows in there. I think you can tell a lot from somebody's face, and I think there were a lot of people really not quite sure about both. And that was, and the other thing that gets me in some of these debates, I think these debates should go back always to what, particularly for the party of government, what did they promise at the last election? Nothing on social care. That was such a big thing at the last election. Yes, they did Brexit, but I thought on pensions. I mean, it does show that he's quite a street fighter, Rishi Sunak, because as Keir Starmer pointed out in a very kind of technical way, our policy is what your policy was until this campaign started.
Right.
So how come that policy is now terrible just
Right.
because you've changed it during the campaign?
But you did it a bit better. I think it's a really good point, but you did that a bit better by saying.
What do you mean?
Well, if only Starmer had framed it in exactly those words.
Oh, I
it
see,
probably would
right.
have been a bit more effective. I think it was a good point, but it didn't quite land.
No.
He managed to
no.
say, I think what he said is, it's the same as it was in the last budget.
Exactly.
I mean,
yeah.
that's a bit of a problem. With him not quite being quick enough on his feet.
Yeah.
Like same as it was in the last budget. What you needed to say is, wait a second. We have literally signed up to your plan in your budget, and you've just changed your mind in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of comments coming in, essentially saying that. I mean, I'm summarising, but given that Sunak is, in the words of one of our viewers, toast, thinking that Keir Starmer should have done better against him. Lots of people are worried about my throat and my voice. Well, that's very kind.
People are
of you.
worried about my gilet. They think I'm too
Yeah, the
hot.
gilet. They think you're Imran. That you've stole it from Imran Khan, but that means you've had to go inside
Well,
a prison.
Extremely talented.
There's
creature.
James W.
Yeah,
Rory
yeah.
cannot surely be in the UK with a GLA in the summer. He is in the UK. I know he's in the UK. No, so I think it was okay. Of course, you never know how long people stay with these things. Fiona was struggling at one point to kind of see it through to the end. I think that there's some of the messages I was getting through it were, and it's fascinating. This has completely changed the nature of viewing. It's the same with sport now, Rory. When you're watching football now, not if you're in the stadium, it's different. But if you're watching football on television now, you're following it on social media, you're watching it, you're following it on social media, and you're talking to your mates on WhatsApp about it as well. And it's the same with these debates now. So I was trying to concentrate to make notes for our discussion, and you keep getting these messages saying that was shit, and you want to say, well, what was shit?
You're totally right. You completely can't concentrate. You're exactly right. There am I sending what I think is a tweet, and then I realised that instead of saying, will someone fix the broken relationship with Europe, I've put bromide relationship with Europe. Meanwhile, I've missed the...
Yeah, no, it was. Yeah, I don't know. When we talked on the main podcast about, or it might be in the Q&A that we put out earlier today, whether we thought these things would endure. And this how bored our listeners are already. There's one of them saying, Alastair, have you ever met any famous footballers? I'm not talking about Diego Maradona on this thing. The other thing to say, by the way, I thought Keir Starmer's point about investment from private sector, this event that I was at earlier, it was the Association of British Ports, and it was really interesting because the Danish guy who's the chief executive, and he made this really, really quite impressive speech. And it was all about, he essentially said, July the 5th cannot come soon enough because we are going to have an opportunity to reset some of the challenges we're facing on trade, on the environment, on net zero. And we're going to have to do it with real, genuine partnership with government, which they obviously feel has been lacking somewhat. It was interesting I asked them, Rory, I think you've done the same. I asked them, so I was speaking at about 6 o'clock. I asked for a show of hands as to how many would watch the debate. Mm-hmm. Now, this thing was at Somerset House. There was drinks on the terrace afterwards. Yeah. It was a very, very, very low number.
No, it's unbelievable. I was saying that I did these big events recently. I've been doing events with 1,200, 1,400 people in live live audiences day after day for the last few weeks, and I keep asking the question. These are obviously people who are interested in politics. They wouldn't be turning up to these shows, and maybe 5% of the audience are watching these debates. Now, that'll be very different with the US debate, and I'm really looking forward to getting into the US debate with you. This Trump-Biden debate, I think, will be absolutely vital because it's doing something a bit different. In this case, we know that both of these people are reasonably bright, reasonably competent. We've seen them perform back and forth in Prime Minister's questions. And fundamentally, this is an election about booting out the Tories. And we know, I know, you're still holding off knowing that Starmer's going to be next Prime Minister. But in America, when a debate happens which is 50-50, when both sides are suggesting the other person is actually not mentally competent, when people are going to be watching how Biden walks across the stage, I mean, the stakes then, it's like a kind of gladiatorial fight.
I know, and also it will be. I think was it you telling me earlier that they're going to mute the mics when Biden speaks they mute Trump, when Trump speaks they mute Biden. It'd be interesting whether Trump still feels that his very rude and aggressive shtick is the right way to go. By the way, Rory, I took up your GB News.
Oh, yeah. How was it?
Well, I did it with Andrew Pierce. He was very polite. He allowed me to talk loads about my books. He had a little pop about me and John Major and underpants. And I said to Andrew Pierce, I really don't think you want to be talking about men and underpants. But they were perfectly nice and perfectly polite. I don't honestly haven't got a clue how many people watch it. Didn't get much feedback from doing it. But no, the American debate is going to be mega. Absolutely mega because it's around the world. I mean, I'd be very surprised. Would any foreign media have covered that debate tonight live? I doubt it.
No, and of course it's completely mystifying. I mean, judging by my American mother-in-law watching it, it's totally mystifying to an international audience because they simply don't get any of the references. She's like, so "What's the triple lock plus pension?" And I'm like, "Shh, I've got to go." Listen, let's just finish because we're getting quite a lot of this stuff of people. Raising issues that weren't raised, and I suppose that's a good way to maybe wrap up a little bit. This has been the last of many debates which are beginning to look a bit repetitive, and they keep focusing on the same things. But what are they not focusing on? You mentioned they're not focusing on Gaza.
Yep.
They're not focusing on adult social care. They're not focusing on mental health. They're not focusing on climate and the environment.
Yeah,
There's no mention of
biodiversity.
Scotland, Wales.
Yeah.
Biodiversity.
Foreign policy generally.
Foreign policy in general.
Nothing.
Yep.
Relations with the US, NATO, a lot of stuff. And I think that I think they're still trapped in this sort of thing that they, you can imagine they'll have been sitting around all day thinking, well, what order should we do it? And they say, oh, we've got to start with betting because that's the lead story. But you know that nothing new was going to come out of that. You just knew that was going to be 5 minutes of, really nothing there. I thought the most interesting discussions in a way, I think because welfare to work and disability hasn't really featured much in the debate. I think that was useful. Ditto councils. Brexit came up, but I sort of feel that it went downhill from the question.
Matthew Lang, nothing on homelessness, other people
or
coming
housing,
in, housing, poverty.
Sewage,
up our waterways,
yeah. No, I think, look, you can't cover everything. You know that when we're doing the podcast, you cannot cover everything. But I think in a debate like that,
but I would have thought. I mean, let's say that we agreed that the key thing for both parties is this question of growth. I mean, given that both parties are basically refusing to borrow, saying they're not going to put up taxes, saying they're going to cut spending, so it's all about growth, and growth presumably has got to come from planning reform. It's got to come from AI.
Yeah.
It's got to come from a closer relationship with Europe. And probably, given that the public services are in trouble, there's got to be serious reforms to the NHS. And that means fights on regulation, on unions, on biodiversity, on climate, on Europe. That's what's going to define the next 5 years. And is there any way that Michelle Hussein or the BBC could have got those in as questions?
Yeah, I think all of them. They obviously made a decision about what they felt had to be covered, and then 2 or 3 that, as I say, were maybe less obvious ones that they've. But I think it's a very kind of media-driven sort of narrative and agenda, even though the questions are coming from members of the public, you know. And I think that the sometimes in these question time type programs, sometimes the left field question that's about something that's not topical will actually produce a better debate. I think on the economy generally and that stuff, I mean, they're both now so rehearsed in their lines. Keir Starmer knows that there's somebody, Michael Maley, can you explain the Ming-Vars strategy? Essentially, you saw that, Michael, is that Keir Starmer has worked out the strategy, he's got the plan, he knows what to campaign on, he knows all the difficult questions, he's worked out the best way to deal with them. So carrying the Ming-Vars means that you're cautiously entering into the campaign because you worry about dropping the Ming-Vars. Whereas Rishi Sunak, who's the kind of the guy who's having to really put up a fight, he's the guy who's kind of lashing out more, taking, if you like, more risks because he's so far behind. So essentially it's just about holding on to it.
We're getting a lot of people tweeting saying there's been a soup in Bolivia, but others saying there's been a coup in Bolivia.
I think it must be coup, yeah. Oh, Lord,
Yeah.
not another one. Wow.
But that's worth looking at. So
Yeah,
this
we'll
is
definitely talk about that.
President of Bolivia, a man called Lucho,
Yeah.
Bolivian banker, economist, and politician. We'll get into that in the proper pod, but that's very interesting. I mean, people will remember there were 6 coup d'états in Africa last year, replacing pro-Western elected governments with pro-Russian military governments.
You know what? I think will happen after the debate is that there'll be lots of journalists going, "Phew, coup in Bolivia. We can talk about that now instead." The one piece of breaking news, and I see somebody else during the debate, Fiona, who was looking at her phone, said that Philip Davis was involved in this betting thing. He's always struck me as quite a nasty piece of work. So no doubt the producer can check out whether I'm saying something that's not true, in which case I'll obviously apologise. But I think he's involved in the betting industry as well. I could be wrong about that, but I think he might be.
Well, it's getting more and more.
Let's get the researchers. Alistair, unrelated, but why do all of your book covers look like, is it beer?
Craft beers. Craft beers.
I don't even know what that means. What is it? I don't know what he's talking about. Great lamp, Rory. I don't think this debate set the world on fire. Oh, here's one. Jonathan Rowe, development team. Hardly a single question in any of the debates about education. This is something we talked to Bridget Phillipson and David Blunkett about, is that education just isn't high enough up the agenda. And that's for both campaigns to address.
Yeah, and you could always find a way. I mean, it's interesting also because they were able to lever things in. I mean, obviously, one of their tricks is to, in the case of Keir Starmer, he clearly wanted to put the NHS and waiting lists in the answer to almost any question, no matter where it's come from.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that for some reason they're not putting education, because you could do the same with education, right? I mean, in fact, I think
Absolutely.
you did that, didn't you? In '97, you could
Yeah.
make the education the answer to almost every problem in the country,
Absolutely.
from growth through to child poverty to social mobility.
Absolutely. Now listen, the producer, having been asked gently to check out the Philip Davis thing, has sent me this saying, for Tory Sir Philip Davis, I mean, for God's sake, another of Boris Johnson's cronies, made £8,000 bet that he would lose his seat. A long-time supporter of the gambling industry, he's said to have wagered he'd be defeated in Shipley.
That's what the Labour candidate's been suspended from.
But hold on, the Labour candidate, as I understand it, is in a seat where he's got no chance. This is a guy who's the serving MP with a 6,200 majority.
I mean, my mother's been on to me on that. She thinks it's even more shocking than betting on the date of the election, because she thinks that's what happens in sport, where you actually throw the match.
If that was a cricketer who's betting on getting out for
lose
naught,
the match.
Right. You could put £1 million on to say that, if you're an opening batsman seriously, that's the equivalent.
I agree. It's unbelievable.
And Rory, let me tell you.
Then you set out to lose your election. Well, I mean, presumably Steve Baker can be pretty confident of that, given that he's sitting on an island in Greece during the entire campaign.
Well, I wonder how many of them have actually done this. I think I am genuinely shocked by that. You're the serving MP. You're going round, presumably campaigning, saying, I deserve to be re-elected and I can win.
Presumably not, if he's trying to
and he's put
trying to-
money on
if he's-
himself to lose.
he's put
I think that's a matter for...
£8,000 is a colossal sum of money.
It's
for
8
someone
of
on
your
an MP.
pots, Rory. It's 8 pots.
To triple up the pots. No, but for someone on MP's salary, that's a colossal amount of money.
Now, Rory, let me just tell you, I checked out. I know you probably don't look at the FA, the Football Association website very often. I looked at it this morning, right? What is the guidance to footballers on betting?
Yep.
A worldwide ban on betting on football was introduced for all those involved in the game at Premier League, Football League, National League, FA Women's Super League and FA Women's Championship, as well as those at clubs in the Northern, Southern and Isthmian leagues. In other words, virtually all footballers, you cannot bet on football anywhere in the world, right? Why are they held to much, much higher standards? Philip Davis says he's done nothing illegal. Well, I don't really care whether it's legal or illegal. It is totally wrong. And it's politically one of the most stupid things I've ever heard in my life.
It was also politically insane.
It's unbelievable.
His constituents are going to be so enraged with him.
You imagine going to vote for him. Right, you're a voter. Somebody wants your mum to come on the podcast, Rory. So, honestly, you're in a campaign and you've bet. And I get it's wrong, whoever you are. But that is, I don't very often get shocked. I'm genuinely shocked by that. Isn't he the one who's on GB News with his wife?
He's married to Esther McVeigh. No, he's not married to Esther McVeigh, is he? No, he's not married to her. He's just a very close friend of hers. God, that's terrible. I'm so sorry. I think they're just very close friends and have been very close friends for a long time. They were very close friends in Parliament.
Are they close friends or are they close friends?
No. I think they're just close friends. I'm sorry. I don't know why. Sorry. It's just that I saw them together a lot in Parliament. They're not married.
Right, but are they married to other people at all?
No, I don't know. I don't think there's any strange things
Okay,
going on.
fine. It's just
not
that
trying
you
to imply
seem-
anything strange. No,
Okay.
it's they just are very close.
Well, may I be
it was
the
very
first-
interesting because Esther McVeigh was in the cabinet at one point, and Philip Davis is like the definitional backbencher, the thorn in the government side. So it was always
Yeah.
kind of really interesting dynamic, that one.
Yeah. Somebody's surprised at my moral outrage, but I just think it's so wrong. I think I'm going to be the first person, I hope I'm the first person to say, I think Philip Davis should be stripped of his knighthood for this. What do you think, Rory?
That's right. You should put it out on Twitter. That'll get 20 ,000 likes immediately.
Exactly. Somebody says that they are married. Now, we've just had an instruction from the producer saying we have to end on a positive note.
Well, it's actually from a listener called James McQuabe.
Oh, okay. Thank you, James.
Yeah, well, it's very good. I noticed Harry Cole's been mocking me for putting out debate advice with a picture of me in my final debate against Boris Johnson with my tie off my head in my hands.
Harry Cole's just never going to get over the fact that our debates with each other in the middle of the night get more viewers than his with Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak. Or we get lots of people. Yeah, they're married, according to Yams B.
Yams B. Oh, well, there we are. They are married.
Yeah,
It's wonderful.
yeah.
Oh, that's
God says,
lovely.
Jeanette, I wish Tatton would vote Esther McVeigh out. Yeah, Tatton was brilliant. Because we won that in 1997 with Martin Bell.
Nick D.
Who
On 19
Martin
September
Bell,
2020, Davis married McVeigh in a private ceremony. So
you
after
go.
I left Parliament, so there was I thinking they'd just been close friends in Parliament, but obviously it was becoming a bit more romantic.
yeah. Now, maybe this is the final question, Rory, because I'm sure you'll have watched both very closely. Macaulay, what was the more boring, that debate or the England-Slovenia game?
Oh, good. Okay, we'll go on. Tell us about the. Wait, keep us up to date here. So England, go on. Tell us what's happening because you keep telling me England's rubbish, but you also
No, I
told me they're
don't
definitely
say
going
that.
through to the quarterfinals.
Well, they are through. I think they're playing Slovakia. So that's actually pretty good draw. Again, Don will correct me if I'm wrong. But the last night's game was really dull, really dull. And but England fans, I mean Scotland fans, like Scotland didn't play very well, but the Scotland fans cheered them off. They were nice to everybody. The England fans were throwing stuff at Gareth Southgate.
Here's a
What's
really
wrong with them?
positive, optimistic thing to end on then.
Go on then.
Positive, optimistic thing to end on is that when people stay up to watch the debate between Biden and Trump,
Yeah.
they will be incredibly relieved and pleased about the debate we just watched. Whatever the flaws are of Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer, Britain
I
is
don't
not
agree.
facing
I don't
the
agree.
horrible,
I don't
horrible,
agree.
horrible threat that's
I
happening
don't
in the United
agree.
States. And we should be very, very grateful in Britain that we have a slightly boring lawyer against a slightly boring banker.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, because I actually will watch the entire American debate with a sense of nervous energy, anxiety, a lot of emotion will be flooding through my veins. Whereas tonight, you sort of got the feeling from the word go, this is going to be all right. And also, by the way, Catty K and the Mooch are going live after the debate, and we're going to get into it next week too. Yeah, no, it's a big thing. And
It's a huge thing. And I thought that was strangely, with all the big problems in the world and soups in Bolivia, I thought it was a sort of slightly reassuring kind of British occasion. BBC, people shouting outside so you can really hear anything.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed that.
And even its boringness was probably something that's going to cheer us up.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Alastair, very much.
Well, that's
See you very soon.
3 in 2 days, Rory. I mean, they're working as like dogs, and what with you doing book tours and me doing book tours, and
my tooth,
with your tooth, is it better?
Can you see? I've got a very big swollen upper lip.
Yeah.
I look like a Neanderthal.
Yeah, but you look better than you did yesterday when you took it out.
It's absolutely unbelievable. I've been on these horrible drugs, and I've been, if anybody listens to Question Time, I just have to apologise. It's just terrible.
Yeah, you were a bit wobbly. I think confusing the IFS and the IMF was a
bad mode. That's a bad mode.
All right, Roy, well, sleep well.
Right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks again. Bye.